December 7th, 1941. 7:55 a.m. Pearl Harbor, Oahu. The first bomb falls before most men finish breakfast. A Nakajima B-5 end-torpedo bomber roars low over the water. So close its shadow schemes a hull of the USS Oklahoma. Sailors look up, confused, some still in white undershirts. Then the torpedo strikes. A column of water erupts against gray steel. The harbor shakes. Across Battleship Row, the USS Arizona sits broadside to Ford Island. Flags limp in the still Hawaiian air. At 8:06 a.m., a modified 16-inch armor-piercing shell drops from 10,000 feet, punching through her deck near Turret 2. There's a flash inside the hull. Then the forward magazine detonates. The explosion splits the ship open like a cracked furnace door. Fire rolls upward in a red tower. 1,177 men vanish in a heartbeat. Above them, a 6M0 fighters bank sharply, sunlight flashing off canopies. The rising sun insignia is unmistakable now. This is no exercise, no drill. On Ford Island, Chief Petty Officer John Finn drags a .50 caliber Browning into the open and fires upward at impossible angles. On Hickam Field, B. 17 flying fortresses arriving from California circle helplessly, unsure where to land as runways burn. Fuel depots erupt. Hangars collapse in sheets of twisted metal. Radio traffic crackles with disbelief. Air raid Pearl Harbor. This is not drill. Admiral Husband E. Kimmel steps onto the balcony of his headquarters as smoke thickens over the harbor. Oil slicks ignite, turning the water into flame. Sailors leap from capsizing decks, swimming through burning fuel. The USS West Virginia lists heavily. The California begins to settle into the mud. You can almost hear the harbor breathing, metal groaning, ammunition cooking off in sharp concussive pops. Overhead, Commander Mitsuo Fukuda leads the second wave, diving through black flak bursts. The attack has achieved tactical surprise beyond expectation. 8 battleships damaged or sinking. Aircraft smashed wingtip to wingtip on the ground. And yet, something critical is missing. The Pacific Fleet's aircraft carriers are not in port. USS Enterprise is at sea. USS Lexington is ferrying aircraft to Midway. USS Saratoga is in San Diego. In Tokyo, planners believe the blow will paralyze American will. Yamamoto himself has warned otherwise. He understands the scale of American industry, the steel mills of Pittsburgh, the assembly lines of Detroit. But on this morning, success looks absolute. By 10 a.m., the sky clears. The Japanese strike force turns north, disappearing over the horizon. The harbor burns. In Washington, President Franklin D. Roosevelt sits in the White House as reports arrive in fragments. Ship sunk, casualties mounting, Hawaii under attack. The shock is physical, not just strategic, personal. In Honolulu hospitals, corpsmen work without pause. Men blackened by oil and fire whisper for shipmates who will never answer. Chaplains kneel beside stretchers laid in rows. Across America, Sunday routines shatter as radio announcers interrupt programming. Families gather around wooden consoles. Words spill into living rooms like smoke. Pearl Harbor. The name becomes a wound. Tokyo expects negotiation. A stunned nation retreating behind its oceans. But beneath the smoke rising over Oahu, something else begins to form. Not visible yet. Not loud. A shift, because while the Pacific Fleet lies broken, the shipyards remain intact. The oil storage farms still stand. The submarine base survives untouched. And across an entire continent, factories wait. The attack was precise, devastating, surgical, but it was incomplete. And in that omission lies the seed of everything that follows. December 8th, 1941, 12:30 p.m. Washington, D.C. The House chamber is packed beyond capacity. Senators lean forward in stiff wooden chairs. Representatives grip folded copies of the speech they have not yet heard. Above them, in the gallery, civilians sit in absolute silence. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt wheels himself to the lectern. His voice is steady, measured, controlled. Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. No theatrics, No shouting, just precision, across the Pacific. The smoke over Pearl Harbor still rises. In Tokyo, celebrations ripple through naval headquarters. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto studies damage assessments quietly. He knows the American carriers escaped destruction. He knows the oil tanks still stand. His staff speaks of triumph. He does not. In Washington, the vote for war against Japan is nearly unanimous. Germany and Italy will declare war within days, binding the conflict into a global furnace. But speeches and declarations are only the surface. The real transformation begins elsewhere. In Detroit, at the River Rouge complex, Ford Motor Company executives meet with Army ordnance officers. Automobile assembly lines are studied not for sedans, but for tanks. In California, Douglas aircraft engineers pull overtime shifts, redesigning production schedules for the SBD Dauntless dive bomber. In Connecticut, Pratt & Whitney prepares to scale radial engine output beyond anything attempted in peacetime. The United States does not simply mobilize men. It mobilizes machines. Within weeks, the War Production Board forms under Donald Nelson. Contracts pour out like artillery fire. Steel quotas are recalculated. Rubber rationing begins. Civilian car production will cease entirely by February 1942. Factories that once stamped chrome and fenders now cut armor plate. At Newport News Shipbuilding in Virginia, draftsmen unroll blueprints for the Essex-class aircraft carrier. Longer flight decks. Increased anti-aircraft batteries. Improved damage control systems. The lessons of Pearl Harbor are already being welded into steel. In San Diego, USS Enterprise steams into port after narrowly missing the attack. Her crew understands something fundamental has shifted. The battleship era is fading. Carriers now define naval power. Across America, recruitment centers overflow. Farm boys from Kansas stand beside machinists from Cleveland. College students sign papers under portraits of George Washington. The Army swells from fewer than 200,000 active personnel to millions within months. But mobilization is not clean. It is chaotic. Railroad strain under troop movements. West Coast cities brace for invasion rumors. On the Atlantic, German U-boats begin Operation Paukenschlag, sinking merchant vessels within sight of American shores. Tankers burn off North Carolina like distant bonfires. The war is suddenly everywhere. In Tokyo, planners calculate timelines. They believe America lacks patience. They believe industrial conversion will take years. They believe resource shortages will cripple sustained output. They misjudge scale. By mid-1942, American shipyards launched Liberty ships at a pace no nation has ever achieved. Welders, many of them women newly hired into industrial roles, work in triple shifts. A single cargo vessel can be assembled in weeks. In Willow Run, Michigan, the Ford plant prepares to build B, 24 Liberators on a moving assembly line nearly a mile long. One heavy bomber, every hour once full production is reached. It sounds impossible, but the machinery of an entire economy is being rewired. You can almost hear it. The clanging of rivets, the hiss of acetylene torches, the thrum of conveyor belts running through the night. Pearl Harbor was meant to paralyze. Instead, it clarifies. The question in December 1941 is not whether America can fight. It is whether it can transform fast enough before Japan consolidates its empire across the Pacific. Because while factories retool and recruits drill, the Imperial Japanese Navy advances. Hong Kong falls. Manila trembles. Singapore prepares for siege. And somewhere in the Pacific, the carrier strike force that shattered Pearl Harbor is already hunting again. January 23, 1942. Rabaul Harbor, New Britain. Dawn. Japanese carrier aircraft sweep low over Simpson Harbor. A 6M0 fighter slash through the humid air. Type 97 Cape bombers descend in formation. Anti-aircraft fire rises in scattered bursts from Australian defenders below. Thin and desperate, within hours, Rabaul collapses. The Imperial Japanese Navy tightens its grip across the Pacific, like a steel vice. Wake Island falls. Guam is overwhelmed. British forces retreat down the Malay Peninsula under relentless pressure. On February 15th, Singapore, the so-called Gibraltar of the East, surrenders to General Tomoyuki Yamashita. 80,000 Allied troops march into captivity. The map changes almost daily. In Manila, General Douglas MacArthur watches the situation deteriorate. Supplies dwindle on the Bataan Peninsula. Malaria spreads through foxholes. Ammunition is rationed round by round. On March 11th, under orders from Washington, MacArthur boards a PT boat and slips through the dark waters toward Mindanao, then onward to Australia. I shall return, he promises. But promises do not stop artillery. In the East Indies, Japanese forces seize oil fields at Balikpapan and Palembang. Tankers begin moving fuel northward. The empire secures the resources it believed essential for survival. From Tokyo's perspective, the strategy is working. Admiral Yamamoto understands the tempo must continue. Shock must be followed by expansion. Expansion by fortification. If defensive perimeters can be established from the Aleutians to the Solomon Islands, he believes America may hesitate to pay the cost of reclaiming them. The Imperial Navy remains formidable. 6 fleet carriers. Veteran aviators hardened by China and Pearl Harbor. Coordinated strike doctrine unmatched in early 1942. And yet, across the Pacific, something shifts. At Naval Air Station Pensacola, new cadets begin accelerated flight training. Their instructors compress lessons once spread over years. In Norfolk, destroyer escorts roll off slipways in steady rhythm. At Bethlehem Steel, furnaces roar day and night. Production curves begin climbing sharply. By spring 1942, American shipyards are laying keels for Essex-class carriers. USS Essex, USS Yorktown, USS Intrepid. Unlike the older Lexington-class battlecruiser conversions, these are purpose-built fleet carriers. Wider flight decks, improved armor protection, enhanced anti-aircraft batteries bristling with 40mm Bofors and 20mm Oerlikons. Not symbolic additions. Mass multiplication. Meanwhile, a small task force steams westward from San Francisco under strict radio silence. 16B, 25 Mitchell medium bombers, sit lashed to the deck of USS Hornet. Lieutenant Colonel James H. Doolittle walks among the crews. The plan is audacious, bordering on reckless. Launch Army bombers from a Navy carrier. Strike Tokyo itself. April 18, 1942. The bombers lift off into gray skies, engines straining against short takeoff distances. They bomb military and industrial targets in Tokyo, Yokohama, Nagoya. The physical damage is limited. The psychological impact is not. For the first time, Japanese civilians hear the distant thud of explosions on their own soil. The myth of invulnerability fractures. Yamamoto understands the implication immediately. American carriers must be destroyed. The next engagement will not be a raid. It will be decisive. In May 1942, the Coral Sea becomes the site of the first carrier versus carrier battle in history. USS Lexington and USS Yorktown face Shokaku and Zuikaku. Aircraft replace battleships as the primary weapons. The Lexington is lost. Shokaku is damaged. Both sides withdraw. Strategically inconclusive. Operationally revolutionary. Then comes Midway. June 4th, 1942. American codebreakers have deciphered Japanese plans. Admiral Chester W. Nimitz positions USS Enterprise, USS Hornet, and a hastily repaired USS Yorktown northeast of the atoll. Dive bombers from Enterprise and Yorktown find the Japanese carriers at the worst possible moment. Decks crowded with refueling aircraft. Within minutes, Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu are burning wrecks. Hiryu follows hours later, for fleet carriers lost. Veteran air crews gone. The strategic initiative begins to tilt. Back in American factories, the first Essex hulls rise steadily from their slips. They are not rushed improvisations. They are the future of naval warfare, designed with lessons written in blood at Pearl Harbor and Midway. Japan still controls vast territory, but its carrier core, the spearhead of its expansion, has been shattered. And across the industrial heartland of the United States, assembly lines are accelerating towards something Japan never fully calculated, not recovery. Overmatch. Summer 1942. Across the American Midwest, The nights no longer grow quiet. At Willow Run, Michigan, a mile-long assembly line hums under harsh industrial lighting. B. 24 Liberator fuselages move forward inch by inch. Riveters hammer in rhythm. Electric winches lift wings into place with mechanical precision. Henry Ford's mass production philosophy has been weaponized. One heavy bomber per hour becomes a target. In Richmond, California, the Kaiser shipyards redefine speed. Welders replace riveters to accelerate hull construction. Prefabricated sections are craned into position with assembly line choreography. The Liberty ship SS Robert E. Peary is completed in just over 4 days, a feat meant not as a novelty, but as proof of scale. Germany's U-boats are sinking Allied tonnage in the Atlantic at alarming rates. Operation Paukenschlag has turned the American coastline into a hunting ground. Tankers burn within sight of Florida beaches. The response is mathematical. If submarines can sink ships faster than they are built, the war tilts toward Berlin. If shipyards can outpace torpedoes, the equation collapses in the Allies' favor. By late 1942, the production curve bends sharply upward. Hundreds of Liberty ships, then Victory ships. Destroyer escorts equipped with sonar and depth charges roll out in steady waves. Escort carriers, smaller but numerous, extend air cover deep into the Atlantic. Convoys grow harder to break. In the Pacific, the transformation is even more visible. The first Essex-class carrier, USS Essex, commissions in December 1942. She carries nearly 100 aircraft, improved flight deck layout, reinforced hangar decks, radar systems far more advanced than what existed at Pearl Harbor. She is not alone. USS Yorktown, USS Intrepid, USS Bunker Hill follow in rapid succession. Each represents thousands of tons of steel, millions of man-hours, and a doctrine built around carrier strike groups instead of battleship lines. Japan, by contrast, struggles to replace experienced aviators lost at Midway and in the Solomons. Training pipelines shorten. Fuel shortages begin to bite. Aircraft production cannot match American output. Numbers are not everything, but industrial asymmetry becomes decisive. On Guadalcanal, beginning August 7, 1942, U.S. Marines land under naval gunfire support. Henderson Field becomes a focal point of a brutal 6-month campaign. Night battles rage in Iron Bottom Sound. Japanese destroyers run supplies in desperate Tokyo Express missions. Control of the air shifts gradually as American aircraft rotate through the island. Replacement planes arrive faster than Japan, can compensate for losses. The attritional dynamic is unmistakable. In Detroit, the Chrysler Tank Arsenal produces M4 Sherman tanks at scale. Simple to manufacture. Reliable, not invincible, but available in overwhelming quantities. Rail cars carry them to ports, where they are loaded onto cargo ships bound for North Africa and beyond. Operation Torch, November 1942. Allied forces land in Morocco and Algeria. American troops engage German forces, for the first time in significant numbers. At Kasserine Pass, they suffer sharp lessons under Field Marshal Erwin Rommel. Defeat, analyzed properly, becomes instruction. Training improves. Command structures adjust. Equipment modifications follow. The American war machine is not static. It iterates. By 1943, aircraft production surpasses 85,000 planes annually. Ship tonnage outpaces Axis sinking capacity. Ammunition stockpiles swell. Oil flows uninterrupted from Texas and Oklahoma refineries. Admiral Yamamoto is killed in April 1943 when U.S. codebreakers intercept his flight itinerary and P-38 Lightnings ambush his transport over Bougainville. The architect of Pearl Harbor is gone. The empire he sought to secure now faces an adversary that has shifted from reactive to relentless. In the Central Pacific, planners draft a strategy known as island hopping. Bypass heavily fortified positions. Seize key airfields and anchorages. Leap forward methodically toward the Marianas, and eventually Japan itself. Each step requires carriers. Each carrier requires steel, turbines, radar arrays, aircraft complements. And the production lines do not slow. What began as shock in December 1941 has become a sustained industrial offensive, not dramatic, not cinematic, just cumulative. And cumulative power, applied without pause, begins to crush resistance not in a single blow, but in layers. The next layer will test whether Japan can defend the inner ring of its empire, because the war is moving west, toward the Philippine Sea, toward the Marianas, toward a confrontation that will decide whether the Pacific remains contested or becomes one-sided. June 1944. The strategic map has tightened. After grinding advances through the Gilberts and Marshalls, American forces now target the Marianas, Saipan, Tinian, and Guam. These islands are not symbolic. They are operationally decisive. From their airfields, new B-29 Superfortress bombers can reach the Japanese home islands directly. For Tokyo, this is a red line. The Imperial Japanese Navy commits the bulk of its remaining carrier strength to what it calls Operation Ago. Vice Admiral Gisaburo Ozawa sails with 9 carriers, hundreds of aircraft, and hopes of restoring naval balance. But the balance has already shifted. On June 15, 1944, U.S. Marines land on Saipan under heavy naval bombardment. Japanese defenses are layered and disciplined. Inland ridgelines become killing grounds. Artillery is pre-registered. Counterattacks are immediate. At sea, the U.S. Fifth Fleet under Admiral Raymond Spruance waits. Task Force 58, commanded by Vice Admiral Mark Mitcher, fields 15 fleet and light carriers. Radar picket ships extend early warning. Fighter direction officers coordinate interceptions using real-time radar plots. Combat air patrols orbit in disciplined formations. Technology and training converge. On June 19th, Japanese carrier aircraft launch in successive waves. Many pilots are newly trained, rushed through abbreviated programs after the attrition of 1942-43. Coordination falters. Navigation errors compound. American radar detects incoming raids at long range. F-6F Hellcats climb to intercept. What follows is asymmetrical air combat. Wave after wave of Japanese aircraft is shot down before reaching effective attack positions. Anti-aircraft fire from battleships and cruisers forms additional layers of defense. Only a handful of bombs find targets. Damage to U.S. ships is limited. By day's end, Japanese carrier aviation has been gutted. American pilots begin referring to battle as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. The phrase is crude, but it reflects the scale of the disparity. Roughly 300 Japanese aircraft are lost in a single day, many with irreplaceable air crews. On June 20th, U.S. forces locate Ozawa's fleet at extreme range. Mitcher orders a late-day strike, knowing recovery will occur after dark. It is a calculated risk. American aircraft damage the carrier Hyo, which later explodes and sinks. Other carriers are hit. As darkness falls, U.S. pilots attempt night landings on moving decks. Many aircraft ditch in the sea due to fuel exhaustion. Rescue operations continue through the night. Losses are real, but the strategic result is decisive. Japan's carrier arm, once the spearhead of Pearl Harbor and the Indian Ocean raids, is no longer a coherent offensive force. Hulls remain. Aircraft and trained aviators do not. On Saipan, fighting intensifies. Japanese troops resist with determination. Civilians, influenced by propaganda about American brutality, commit mass suicides from cliffs at Marpy Point. The human cost extends beyond combatants. By July 9th, Saipan is declared secure. Tinian and Guam follow in the coming weeks. Engineers rapidly convert captured airfields into major B-29 bases. Long runways are laid across coral and volcanic soil. Fuel depots, maintenance hangars, bomb storage bunkers rise in geometric grids. Strategic bombing of Japan is no longer theoretical. In Tokyo, the fall of Saipan triggers political shock. Prime Minister Hideki Tojo resigns. The defensive perimeter that was supposed to shield the homeland has been breached. The industrial contest that began after Pearl Harbor has matured into geographic inevitability. American submarines intensify attacks on Japanese shipping lanes. Oil tankers from the Dutch East Indies are sunk in growing numbers. Merchant tonnage collapses. Fuel shortages begin to paralyze fleet movements and pilot training programs. Japan is being compressed. From the sea lanes below, from the skies above, from island bases advancing ever closer. The next objective lies further west. The Philippines. For the United States, it is a promise to fulfill. General Douglas MacArthur had vowed, "I shall return," after withdrawing in 1942. For Japan, it is a final shield between American forces and the South China Sea. The confrontation, there will not be a single engagement. It will be the largest naval battle in history. October 1944. The Philippines are no longer a distant objective. They are the hinge of the Pacific War. On October 20th, U.S. forces land on Leyte. General Douglas MacArthur wades ashore and delivers the line he had promised since 1942. "I have returned." The symbolism is deliberate. The operation itself is logistical and vast. But Japan's response is even larger. Operation Shogo is conceived as a decisive naval counterstroke. The plan is complex and desperate. Multiple task forces will converge on Leyte Gulf from different directions. Decoy carriers will lure American fast carriers away. Battleships and cruisers will penetrate the invasion area and destroy vulnerable troop transports. At the center of the striking force is Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita's powerful fleet, the super battleships Yamato and Musashi, heavy cruisers, destroyers. Their guns are unmatched in caliber. On October 23rd, American submarines Darter and Dace intercept Kurita's force in the Palawan Passage. Torpedoes sink 2 heavy cruisers, including Kurita's flagship Atago. The fleet continues, but the element of surprise erodes. The next day, U.S. carrier aircraft strike in the Sibuyan Sea. Musashi absorbs repeated bomb and torpedo hits. Her armor is formidable, but physics prevails. She capsizes and sinks after hours of punishment. One of the largest battleships ever built disappears beneath the surface. Yet the battle is not linear. It fractures. To the north, Admiral Ozawa's remaining carriers move as bait. Their air groups are skeletal. But their presence triggers Admiral William Halsey's aggressive instinct. Believing the carriers to be the primary threat, Halsey steers the powerful Third Fleet northward, taking the fast battleships with him. This decision creates a gap through the San Bernardino Strait. Kurita's surviving force emerges unexpectedly into the waters off Samar on the morning of October 25th. What stands between heavy battleships and the lightly defended invasion fleet are escort carriers and their thin screens of destroyers and destroyer escorts. Small ships, limited armor, modest firepower. Task Unit April 3rd, 77, call sign Taffy 3. The engagement that follows is disproportionate. Japanese battleships open fire at long range. Water columns erupt around American escort carriers. Yet the response is immediate and aggressive. Destroyers charge forward, laying smoke screens and launching torpedo attacks against ships many times their size. USS Johnston, USS Hull, USS Herman maneuver at flank speed, firing until ammunition runs low. Pilots from escort carriers launch aircraft with whatever ordnance is available, depth charges, machine gun runs, even empty guns used as feints. Confusion spreads within Kurita's formation. Reports of American carriers, real or misidentified, suggest stronger opposition. Torpedo wakes force evasive maneuvers. The battle space becomes chaotic. Against expectation, Kurita withdraws. Taffy 3 has lost ships and men at severe cost, but the invasion fleet remains intact. Further south, in Surigao Strait, another Japanese force attempts to penetrate Leyte Gulf. There, U.S. battleships execute a classic crossing the T maneuver. Radar-directed gunfire at night devastates the approaching column. It is the last battleship versus battleship engagement in history. To the north, Halsey's fleet engages Ozawa's decoy carriers off Cape Engano. For Japanese carriers are sunk, but by then, their aviation capability had already been hollowed out. When the smoke clears, the Imperial Japanese Navy is no longer a coherent fighting force. It still possesses ships. It no longer possesses strategic reach. Fuel shortages deepen. Training collapses. Capital ships remain largely confined to port for the remainder of the war. A new tactic emerges in the Philippines. Kamikaze attacks. Pilots, often barely trained, deliberately crash aircraft loaded with explosives into Allied ships. The psychological dimension is clear. The material effect is uneven but real. Several ships are sunk or heavily damaged. It signals something fundamental. Japan is shifting from conventional naval warfare to sacrificial resistance. Leyte Gulf is not merely a victory of tonnage. It marks the end of Japan as a blue water naval power. The Pacific has narrowed. The next battles will not be fleet actions in open ocean. There will be amphibious assaults against islands closer to the Japanese homeland. Islands where airfields matter more than sea lanes. Iwo Jima, Okinawa. Each step will increase the cost. Each step will bring the war within direct reach of Japan itself. February 19, 1945. Iwo Jima is 8 square miles of volcanic rock, black sand, and hardened tunnels. It sits roughly 750 miles from Tokyo. From its airfields, B-29 bombers can receive fighter escort for the first time. Damaged bombers can attempt emergency landings rather than ditching at sea. On paper, it is a small objective. In reality, it becomes a proving ground for the final phase of the Pacific War. Lieutenant General Tadamaki Kurabayashi commands the Japanese garrison. He does not plan a banzai charge. He designs a defense in depth. Nearly 11 miles of tunnel-connect bunkers, artillery positions, and machine gun nests. Guns are hidden. Beaches are lightly defended. The real resistance waits inland. When U.S. Marines land, the initial advance seems manageable. Then the island opens fire. Mount Suribachi dominates the southern end. Every approach is pre-sighted. Artillery and mortars are coordinated through subterranean lines. American flamethrowers, demolition teams, and tanks become essential in clearing fortified positions. Progress is measured in yards. On February 23rd, Marines raise the American flag atop Mount Suribachi. The photograph by Joe Rosenthal becomes iconic. It suggests triumph. On the ground, fighting continues for another month. By March 26th, Iwo Jima is declared secure. The cost is stark. Approximately 6,800 Americans are killed. Nearly the entire Japanese garrison of over 20,000 is dead. Few surrender. Strategically, the island serves its purpose. Thousands of B-29 crews later use Iwo Jima as an emergency landing site. The operational calculus is cold but clear. The next target is larger, far larger. Okinawa, April 1st, 1945. The island lies only 340 miles from the Japanese home islands. It offers air bases for invasion staging. Its capture would place Allied forces within direct striking distance of Kyushu. The invasion, Operation Iceberg, becomes the largest amphibious assault in the Pacific theater. Initial landings encounter limited resistance. This is deliberate. Japanese forces under General Mitsuru Ushijima have withdrawn to fortified positions in the southern part of the island, particularly along the Shuri Line. Concrete bunkers, reverse slope defenses, artillery hidden in caves. Rain turns fields into mud. Visibility drops. Every ridge is contested. Meanwhile, the sea becomes a killing zone. Kamikaze attacks intensify to unprecedented levels. Waves of aircraft target Allied ships. Radar pickets absorb repeated strikes. Destroyers and carriers are hit. Fires spread across decks. Damage control teams fight to keep vessels afloat. One of the last sorties of the battleship Yamato takes place during this campaign. In April 1945, she sails on a one-way mission toward Okinawa with minimal fuel, intended to beach herself and act as a stationary artillery platform. American carrier aircraft intercept her before she can approach. Bombs and torpedoes overwhelm the ship. Yamato explodes and sinks, symbolizing the end of an era. On land, the battle grinds forward. American infantry confront entrenched offenders who refuse surrender. Civilians are caught between armies. Propaganda and fear drive many to suicide. The human toll expands beyond combat statistics. By June 22nd, Okinawa is secured. The numbers are sobering. Over 12,000 Americans killed, tens of thousands wounded. Japanese military dead exceeds 70,000. Civilian casualties are immense. For American planners, Okinawa becomes a projection. If this is the cost of capturing a peripheral island, what would the invasion of Kyushu and Honshu require? Operation Downfall, the planned invasion of Japan, anticipates casualties on a scale unseen in the Pacific War. Estimates vary, but all assume staggering losses on both sides. Meanwhile, a separate project has matured in secrecy. Since 1942, under General Leslie Groves and physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer, the Manhattan Project has pursued a weapon based not on explosives, but on atomic fission. Facilities in Los Alamos, Oak Ridge, and Hanford operate at industrial scale. By mid-1945, the weapon is no longer theoretical. Germany has surrendered in May 1945. The war in Europe is over. In the Pacific, Japan remains defiant. Its navy is crippled. Its cities endure conventional bombing, including the firebombing of Tokyo in March 1945, which kills tens of thousands in a single night. Yet surrender does not come. The final decision will not be made at sea. It will not be made on a beachhead. It will be made in the sky. August 6, 1945. Hiroshima wakes under a pale summer sun. Soldiers march along streets still lined with bombed-out buildings from previous raids. Civilians carry baskets, unaware that their morning will be shattered by a force unlike anything in human memory. At 8:15 a.m., the Enola Gay releases its payload, the uranium bomb, Little Boy. It falls silently for 47 seconds. Then the sky detonates. A blinding flash, white-hot and merciless, expands outward, vaporizing structures, trees, and people within moments. Shadows are burned into walls. Steel melts. The city's heartbeat stops. Emergency responders, soldiers, and civilians alike are obliterated or trapped under collapsed buildings. Fires spread across the city in spiraling infernos. Survivors crawl through ash and debris, eyes wide, faces blistered. The air is thick with radiation, a silent killer invisible to human senses. 3 days later, August 9th, Nagasaki faces a similar fate. The plutonium bomb, Fat Man, drops over an industrial valley, detonating at 11:02 a.m. The terrain channels the blast, amplifying destruction across shipyards, factories, and residential areas. Over 40,000 are killed instantly. Tens of thousands more will die in the months and years ahead from radiation and injury. By mid-August, the cumulative devastation is undeniable. Japan's military leadership confronts a terrifying calculus. Conventional defenses are irrelevant against this new weapon. Cities can be erased in moments. The human and industrial capacity to continue the war has been shattered. Emperor Hirohito addresses the nation on August 15th. His voice, calm yet heavy with the weight of inevitability, announces surrender. The terms of the Potsdam Declaration are accepted. The Japanese Empire, once a colossus of ambition, capitulates. Across the Pacific, the world realizes the war that began at Pearl Harbor has ended not with a single decisive battle, but with a fusion of strategy, technology, and human endurance. The atomic bomb marks the birth of a new era, one where the scale of destruction is limited only by imagination and physics. Soldiers, civilians, and planners on all sides confront the moral and strategic ramifications. The cost has been measured in hundreds of thousands of lives, entire cities annihilated, and an entire continent reshaped by war and diplomacy. From the shattered decks of the Arizona to the frozen ruins of Stalingrad, from Iwo Jima's black sand to Hiroshima's atomic fire, the story of World War II reveals the extremes of human ingenuity and the depths of human suffering. It is a narrative of shock, resilience, and irreversible change. The war is over. The world is changed forever.